Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be exploring the astrology of March 2024. So this is another busy month in the cosmic calendar. We have a continuing conjunction between Chiron and the North Node. I did talk about this last month because it was exact on the 19th of February, but I think it's important to bear in mind that this aspect is still in play, and indeed it will be in play right up until the middle of May. Obviously, yes, it is now waning, but because we're moving into eclipse season this month, then I think this is still going to be a very important part of the story because eclipses are connected with the movement of the nodes. We are going to have a very strong focus on Pisces energy during this month. So yes, we are going to move into Aries season halfway through March, but every time one of the celestial bodies leaves Pisces, another comes into this sign. So it's like we have this continuous sort of rolling wave of Pisces energy in play. And this can sometimes mean that we feel somewhat disorientated, we're uncertain about what's going to happen next. Everything is very fluid and flexible and changeable. So we can feel a little ungrounded when we have all of this Pisces energy in play. And as we come into the month, there is going to be this interesting aspect between the old ruler and the new ruler of Pisces. So Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces and Neptune is the modern ruler of Pisces. And these two are going to be forming a semi-square aspect. And this is going to be on the 4th of March. It's actually the final in a series of 3 semi-squares that we've had with these two characters. So of course we've got Neptune in Pisces, so it's in its own sign, so it's working very powerfully, very, very strongly. And then we have Jupiter there in Taurus. So Jupiter in Taurus is super focused now on the opportunities we have to increase our security, whether that is material. Honestly, with Jupiter, it's often the case that we're looking for those things that can give us a good time in the world. You know, Jupiter is the benefic. Jupiter is the one who is the fulfiller of promises. Sometimes Jupiter is the one that says, hey, there's all this wonderful abundance in the world. Isn't this an amazing place? Let's have more of this, please. But Neptune, the semi-square to Neptune, by its nature, squares of all kinds are aspects that do put us in a bit of a corner. They kind of force us to take some kind of action. They're saying to us there is some kind of conflict here. And so we have a minor conflict because it's a semi-square, not a full square. There's a niggle about how can I realize all of these wonderful dreams I have. There is so much in my imagination, Neptune. But can we really truly make it a reality? Because Jupiter in Taurus needs to see something tangible. And we want to see tangible growth around our dreams, the things that we want to bring into being. And so what's happening here is that this niggling aspect is like the cosmos just giving us a poke to say, look, if you want this security, firstly, you need to believe in what you're doing. You need to be doing something meaningful. This is all about faith and spirituality with Jupiter and also Neptune. But at the same time, we can't just fantasize about, how wonderful everything could be without doing some kind of practical work. Taurus is very hardworking. It's the gardener, the farmer. So we get a sense from that archetype of how much work is required to get the goods, to make things fruitful in our lives, to give us the abundance that we're looking for. So although this aspect is a little tense, it is useful because it's just asking us to ground some of these dreams into reality. It's almost like the universe is kind of looking at us saying, Well, are you going to just dream about it, or are you going to do something about it? Are you going to take this opportunity, this opening that I've given you to develop these ideas so that you do have something real and tangible at the end of it? On the 5th of March, Mars is going to move into create a sextile to the ongoing Chiron conjunction to the North Node. So Mars is going to sextile the North Node on the 5th of March. It'll form the sextile to Chiron on the 6th of March. But we're also needing to bear in mind that Mars is building up to a square with Uranus, which is exact on the 9th of March. So this is an interesting interplay of energies. So Mars, of course, in Aquarius is already making a noise. I'm actually recording this on the 13th of February, just as Mars has entered Aquarius and is about to kick off with the conjunction with Pluto. So we're already seeing that things are hotting up out there in the world. By this time, by March, Mars will be away from Pluto and halfway through Aquarius, so well into his journey here. And he indicates in Aquarius that we're very motivated to inspire groups, to lead, to make connections, to forge friendships, to bring groups together. We're motivated to do something different, to take some kind of new, novel, or even radical or rebellious action. So it has an edge to it. Mars in Aquarius can be very, very, very independent, which is kind of interesting because we've got all the focus on groups and friends and socializing. So yes, that can be great if everyone is on the same page. But the troubles sometimes start when we have differences of opinion, and then Mars can go on the offensive or defensive, and so we can get conflicts within our groups. So the positive sides of this transit we can see expressed through the connection with Chiron and the North Node. So it's almost like Mars is saying, we now have an opportunity to do something that is going to be helpful, that is going to maybe fix things with Chiron. It inspires us to be brave about our collective healing, to share our stories, to push each other, to encourage each other, to feel stronger. I mean, this is wonderful for, it's almost like a coaching aspect. It's wonderful for coaching ourselves and coaching each other to overcome what we perceive to be our weaknesses. And so, yes, this can be a really strengthening aspect, and it is actually helping us along our karmic path. Mars sextile the North Node. It's saying what we do now is going to open the way. But this square to Uranus is a little tricky because, of course, Uranus is dispositing Mars. So that just means Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, which is where Mars is right now. It's kind of like his landlord. So Mars's landlord currently is Uranus in Taurus. And now I'm getting a scenario kind of like Mars saying, hey, you've not done the repairs, I'm not paying my rent. So now we can start to get a little image going on here of this sort of conflicting situation. We've got people who are seeing things very, very differently. And there is a potential for reckless behavior when Mars squares Uranus. Now, this aspect, as with any aspect, is trying to help us. It's trying to show us there is something here that needs to change. You do, in fact, need to take some kind of new or different action. This is Uranus, the landlord, saying, hey, Mars, you're in Aquarius, so you can't sort of stick your feet into the ground and insist on everything being your way all the time. Sometimes you have to allow for things to be changeable, things to be spontaneous, things to be unpredictable. People are unpredictable. Life is unpredictable. And so there needs to be a bit more openness to alternative ways of doing things. That's really the key. Alternative ways of doing things, and maybe experimenting rather than trying to force the point, which is sometimes what can happen with any square because it actually has a point in that aspect. Instead of trying to do that, we can simply have the attitude of, maybe this situation isn't working as I would like it to, so I'm just going to experiment with different ideas and be open to taking some direction from others, and maybe just try something a little wild, but in a grounded way, because this, like I say, can be recklessness, and we can feel incredibly restless as well because we want things to happen quickly. We always want things to happen quickly with Mars, but with Uranus involved, Uranus is electrical. It's lightning, and thinking about how fast lightning flashes, we get this sense that we want everything to be happening in the blink of an eye. We want to see the results of our actions immediately. But of course, life is not always like that. So this is why sometimes astrologers sort of say that Mars square to Uranus, and sometimes Mars opposite Uranus as well, any tense aspect between these two planets can sometimes indicate things like being very accident prone. And that's because if we're moving too quickly, we're not paying attention. If we're angry, when you're running around because you're really fed up about something and you're mulling over it, or you're swearing in your head, and then you stub your toe or you bang into the doorway as you're walking through it, we become a bit clumsy because our energy is kind of flying all over the place. I'm sure we can all remember moments when we've been feeling like that we just feel completely discombobulated and scattered. And this can be the effect of Mars square to Uranus. Now, we do have a little bit of an anchor to Chiron and also to the North Node, with Mars still in a sextile to these. Maybe it is the fact that we have this sense that, if I take action, it is going to help. It is going to bring things together. It is going to get over this problem that seems to have been chronic for ages and ages, and I haven't been able to, surmount this. I'm seeing the way. And it's almost like we're getting excited about that. But the overstimulation from Uranus may make us impatient for that potential to be realized. So the key word when Mars is square to Uranus is patience. Easier said than done. But if you can just take a beat, take a moment, if you feel like you're reacting, because this is hair trigger kind of energy, if you feel like you're being triggered, you get angry, you want to do something immediately about it, just take a minute. Give it a few days for this to start to wane. So, as I said before, it's the 9th of March when Mars is exactly square to Uranus. So give it a couple of days for that energy to start to wane before doing anything that's really radical. On the 10th of March, we will have Mercury moving into Aries. So when Mercury changes signs, it changes the way that we think, how we use the mind, how we learn, and also how we communicate with one another. And it might also change what we are thinking about as well. So Aries, the first of the fire signs, this is a very powerful, strong, independent, courageous, pioneering, inspiring sign. So we're filled with new ideas. That's usually the first thing, especially after Mercury's been in Pisces, where maybe it's been harder to think because our feelings have been so overwhelming. But still, now he's come into Aries, we start to get clear about, this is what I want, this is what I want to say, this is what I want to communicate. Now, it can be very good for asserting opinion, for starting a conversation, for initiating a connection. These are all the positives. The negatives are that, again, we have the word impatient because we want everything to happen yesterday. Remember, Mars rules Aries. So mentally, we're kind of speeding up. We're thinking fast. Maybe we're even talking faster. But we also want to make decisions quickly, and we want other people to make decisions quickly, to say yes or no. Just decide, because Aries likes to be very clear cut. It's an energy that's kind of no nonsense. Just tell it like it is, says Mercury in Aries. Say it like it is. Just tell me one way or another. So we can see that sometimes that can be really useful, and other times if there are conflicting energies in the air, remembering Mars is still square to Uranus, that can be somewhat more of a challenge. So again, it is about patience, keyword. Now, we're also going to have a new moon, and this is going to be the new moon in Pisces. So as with any other new moon, we are at a beginning. This is a seed point, and the seeds that we are planting around this time are connected with our search for connection to all that is. It's connected to our spiritual path. It's connected to our sense of peacefulness, our sense of meaning. And this is Pisces season after all. So there is this feeling that we're coming now to the end. We're coming now to the end of the journey of the sun through all of the signs. It's a sign associated with retreat and rest and release and surrender. And what's so interesting about this lunation is that it's engaging with that square between Mars and Uranus in a positive, helpful way. So the moon and sun are sextile to Uranus and in a semi-sextile to Mars. So it's almost like the moon and sun have joined forces. So the conscious and the unconscious have joined forces to say, Mars and Uranus, please stop fighting. We know that you're fighting for your freedom, but maybe right now the best thing we can do is to retreat, is to back off, is to come back to ourselves, is to remember that everything and everyone is connected, and there is meaning in all of this, and there is a divine plan at work. So my feeling is that this lunation is really inviting us to go within, to find that freedom that we're yearning for in the outer world. We're going to find it in the inner space. So it's a very imaginative and soulful and spiritual lunation that may bring up some genius resolutions to some of the conflict or the unsettled feelings that we've been having. On the 11th of March, the day after the new moon, Venus will then enter Pisces. So this is what I was saying earlier about how every time one planet leaves Pisces, so that was Mercury, another enters a few days later, so that we get this continuous wave of emotional content, this continuous etheric wave, these cosmic waves rippling through the atmosphere, and we're sensing them, we're feeling them. And Venus going into Pisces, this certainly has a softening effect because Venus is the heart. And when she is in Pisces, it's almost like there are no boundaries. I love everyone. I love everything. I feel so connected to it all. And yes, this can be a beautiful transit. It's wonderful for anything to do with creativity because it's almost like all the colours of the rainbow are present with Venus in Pisces, you know, like water glistening. It's just really soft and sensitive. However, the shadow of this is because there are no boundaries, then we can almost like forget ourselves when it comes to our relationships. And so there can be a sense of feeling that we're giving so much to others, whether it's the partner or whether it's someone else. we can give and give and give to the point where we start to feel like we're disappearing and we're not truly valuing ourselves. So that's the shadow to be aware of. But still, this is a very kind and compassionate transit, and we can all do with some tenderness, I think, in the world, especially whilst we've had this very animated connection between Mars and Uranus, and it is still there in the background. We are then going to continue with this very dreamy, kind of ethereal vibe, because the Sun will then join Neptune. This is on the 17th of March, a new synodic cycle, a new beginning between the Sun and Neptune. I don't know if you can hear it, but behind me a dove is now calling. This is Percy, who lives in the tree with his wife Penelope outside my window. They've just been fed and now they're outside calling as I'm talking about all of this very spiritual, soulful Pisces energy. So with the Sun conjunct Neptune, we are illuminating our search for meaning and finding inner peace within the self. And maybe there is also something about surrendering our ego, because the Sun is associated with our identity and our purpose in life, and it's who we think of ourselves to be. But we are also much more than that. And sometimes the ego can insist that we must do things a certain way, or we have a certain goal in life and all these kinds of things. And this is who I believe I am. And then Neptune says, you are so much more than all of that. Relax these notions. Let down some of your boundaries. Let down some of your walls. Feel what there is to feel. It's almost like it's inviting us to open our senses, to open our psychic senses, to remember that we are souls, to remember our soul's history. Pisces can sort of speak of a lot of our past lives and our spiritual heritage. We might have these fleeting memories or just fleeting feelings that seem to relate to another time and another place. Or maybe you're experiencing some kind of deja vu. The shadow of the Sun's conjunction to Neptune is simply that sometimes we don't see ourselves clearly during this time. And because of that, we're also not seeing the world clearly during this time. The Sun can actually represent one of the eyes, the right eye. So the Sun and Moon are generally the eyes. And so if you add in Neptune, then it's like you're looking at the world through a distorted mirror, almost like a fairground mirror. And that can be really interesting and kind of weird and strange and fantastical. But also it's not based in reality. It's not the truth of what we're actually looking at. So that's what we have to be careful with as the Sun joins Neptune. Things are not always as they seem. On the 19th of March, we will have once again an activation of Chiron conjunct the North Node, and this is going to come from Mercury. So Mercury will conjoin the North Node on the 19th and then conjoin Chiron on the 20th of March. So now we have a conversation happening here about our healing process. And maybe sometimes we can have difficulties with communications because we don't know what to say, or we don't know whether we're saying it in the right way, or we feel some kind of vulnerability about speaking up, which is a bit frustrating because Mercury in Aries just wants to tell it like it is. But now we are needing to be more sensitive in how we deliver our ideas and our thoughts. Now, something important to note here with Mercury's conjunction to Chiron is that this is actually the first of three, because next month Mercury is going to go retrograde and Mercury enters the shadow zone on the 19th of March. And it interests me because Mercury will be on that 16 degrees of Aries. So 16 degrees and 1 minute of Aries is where Mercury enters the shadow zone. And just kind of a reminder that Chiron conjunct the North Node was on 16 degrees and 45 minutes of Aries. So it's the same degree. So it makes me feel like this ongoing conversation is rooted in this karmic push towards facing what needs to be healed and what needs to be fixed. So Mercury will keep bringing us back to this conversation. We can't push it under the carpet, says Mercury conjunct Chiron. We have to talk about it. We have to talk about the painful stuff so that we can heal. On the 20th of March, we will have the sun's ingress into Aries. So this is the equinox, spring equinox in the northern hemisphere and autumn equinox in the southern hemisphere. The sun's entry into Aries means that the sun is on the Aries point. So the 0 degrees of Aries, it's the beginning of everything. We return to the beginning. We're starting a new journey around the astrological wheel. And by the way, this is International Astrology Day. So it's a really good time to have a reading or study your chart or, post stuff about astrology and just kind of be excited about this beautiful, amazing, insightful system of spiritual and personal development. I've studied astrology for 40 odd years and it still inspires me and fascinates me and interests me, and there's always something fresh and new about it. It's never the same. The skies are always moving. The story is always unfolding. So yes, celebrate astrology on this date. Anyway, so we're moving into Aries season. So this finally does start to break down some of that Pisces emphasis. However, we are then going to have Mars entering Pisces on the 22nd of March. So this is an interesting mix because Mars is the ruler of Aries. So when we're in Aries season, Sun in Aries, the impetus is towards new beginnings, fresh challenges, pioneering into new territory, being confident, being ourselves, being independent, and just kind of getting things done and initiating the plan to fulfill our purpose. That's very much the sun in Aries. But then Mars going into Pisces. Pisces is the sign that's associated with peace, with retreat, with surrender. And Mars doesn't really find that very easy, because Mars is the warrior. But maybe we could see this as the warrior also needs to rest sometimes. The warrior needs time to remember why he is fighting at all, why he is doing what he is doing. And when Mars goes into Pisces, we are motivated to pursue some kind of spiritual calling or spiritual path. Yes, the shadow of this can mean that we feel a bit lost because, again, we're fighting against the tide. The instinct when we feel lost is to do something, anything to get away from feeling lost because we don't like it, because we want certainty. As human beings, we want certainty. We want to know what's going to happen next. We want to feel secure. But with Mars in Pisces, sometimes we just have to learn to surrender and allow life to carry us for a while instead of trying to force things to go a certain way. So that's a bit of a repeated message because I said something similar when Mars was squaring Uranus. And now we're also getting this coming up as a feeling. I need to let this go. I need to surrender to where things are. I need to accept instead of fighting all the time. Stop resisting, just allow. So Mars going into Pisces and especially with Venus being there still as well, we do have a wonderful opportunity here for really experimenting and playing with our imagination, our creativity. I mean, this is really beautiful for that. And it's really good for spending quality time with those we love. And it can also be very good for spending time alone. We already had a prompt towards that with the Sun going through Pisces and Venus going through Pisces. But now with Mars going into Pisces, sometimes we really feel like we want to have some time out. We're motivated, Mars. We have a desire for quiet and peace and just, doing nothing. It can be a real challenge for many of us, I think, because we're, living in a world that is so busy and so goal orientated. We always feel like we should be doing something, but sometimes we have to be doing nothing so that we are able to hear what our soul is telling us, what our feelings are telling us. Sometimes we just have to stop. That is Mars going into Pisces. On the 25th, we will have a full moon in Libra, and this is also going to be a lunar eclipse. So now we are beginning eclipse season. This is going to be at 5 degrees and 7 minutes of the sign Libra, and this is a penumbral eclipse. So basically the moon and the south node, they're quite a long way apart, they're 10 degrees apart, and the penumbral eclipse means that the moon is just passing through the outer shadow of the earth. So it's not a full eclipse, but astrologically speaking, it's still important. It means that we have some kind of important conclusion or important ending that is connected with our relationships or contracts or agreements with others. Libra is a sign that's associated with other people. And we've been prompted a lot with the South Node in Libra that we need to move away from sitting on the fence. We need to move away from trying to please all the people all the time and move towards independence, move towards being more assertive, move towards being brave and courageous and going our own way, living our own lives. It doesn't mean, of course, just leaving everyone behind and living like you're on an island. It just means that for those of us that have been settling too much, now there is an opportunity to reset that balance. So these are the themes of the lunar eclipse. I will be doing a full exploration of this chart, as I do for every lunation, over on my Patreon, and that is also accessible to my paying Substack members as well. So all the links for that in my social media will be below in the notes. So if you have any factors around sort of 4 to 6 degrees of the cardinal signs, so that is Libra, Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, then the themes of this lunar eclipse are likely to be more prominent for you. The end of the month brings in stories from the goddesses. So first up is Hygeia. Hygeia is going to enter Aries on March the 28th. Which brings in a story about healing our sense of self. Hygeia is one of the medical asteroids, and she is associated with hygiene. And the way she works is to take preventative action. She basically says prevention is better than cure. So in Aries, the sign associated with the self, she is encouraging us to take some kind of action to shore up our vulnerabilities and protect our weak points, and also working on our confidence and ability to assert ourselves. This is all going to help, says Hygeia. It's going to help to prevent problems from occurring later down the line. So if you look to the house that contains Aries or houses in your own chart, then you can see where Hygeia is asking you to take some kind of preventative action so that you don't feel compromised or kind of on the back foot later down the line. We will then have Ceres squaring the nodal axis. This is going to be on March the 29th. And of course, that will once again activate Chiron conjunct the North Node. A square to the nodes suggests there is a missed step. And so we're getting a push to overcome a hurdle that has stopped us from getting out of our comfort zone. So that's the South Node. So Ceres in Capricorn, she's really concerned with our reputation, our status, our work, our responsibilities, and accomplishing long-term goals. This is the archetypal mother. And she is saying to us, if you want this, if you want to accomplish this goal, if you want to get to this job or whatever it is, then you're going to need to work for it. But I will reward you in the end. Ceres is abundance. She is the mother goddess, and she governs all of the crops that feed us. So she will feed us, but we have to do the work first. And she's also saying, basically, we need to take responsibility. We need to take responsibility, nurture our sense of accountability so that we can build good foundations for the future. And this is a karmic push because it's square to the nodes. It's a karmic push to take better care of ourselves at the end of the day, because if we don't take care of ourselves, then it's very hard to pursue our goals and to get what we want out of life. So Ceres says, if you work on this now, then you're not going to have to settle. With the South Node in Libra, I mentioned earlier, sometimes there is an inclination to settle for the status quo. But that North Node in Aries, the bell keeps ringing to say, no, we need to be brave enough to go after what we want so that we're not settling for less than we deserve. And so Ceres in Capricorn is really doing everything she can to get us there, to get us past these blocks. Because Capricorn can also speak of where we limit ourselves. So she's kind of saying, stop limiting yourself. Don't limit yourself. Don't hold yourself back. North Node in Aries is step up, push yourself forwards. March the 29th is also the date that Pallas will actually station retrograde. So I've just been saying about going forwards, but Pallas is going to station retrograde. So this signifies that to find an effective strategy or to solve a problem, maybe we have to go back over some old ground. So again, wherever Pallas is moving in your chart, look to where Sagittarius is featured in your chart. What house is it connected to? What part of life is that connected to? If there has been a problem there, there is this push from Pallas to revisit this, to go back over things. Because in Sagittarius, it's saying we need to challenge our assumptions or challenge our beliefs that we have about this problem. And so what Pallas will do as she goes retrograde through Sagittarius, she will go back into Scorpio as well. But while she's in Sagittarius, she's going to help us to see the big picture. She's kind of saying you need to look again. There's a missing piece here. And without that missing piece, we can't make an effective strategy, or we can't get past this problem. We've got to see the big picture. The very final aspect of the month will be Vesta re-entering Cancer in direct motion now on March the 31st, so right at the very end of the month. So Vesta was first here in Cancer way back in last September. So for some of you, depending on whether Vesta is interacting strongly with your chart, you might find there are some echoes from last year, last September time. Now, basically, Vesta stationed retrograde in Cancer, then went back into Gemini. So now here she is again in Cancer with a much clearer idea of what is sacred, particularly when it comes to home and family matters, domestic matters, personal matters, how you feel. Cancer is associated with your feelings. Now, Vesta is the goddess of hearth and home. So this really is an extra special time to either honour Vesta herself, if you feel drawn to do so, or we could say just simply to honour the spirit of your home. It's about giving thanks for having a roof over your head, or maybe it's spending time with your family, or maybe you just want to kind of create a really cozy and welcoming atmosphere for yourself. If you've had a long day at work, come home and create this nest. These are really simple ways of keeping your inner light alive. And this is what Vesta is about. She is a priestess. She is your inner priestess saying, come home to yourself. I've lit the fire for you. Come in, warm yourself by this fire, and remember who you are. This concludes my reading for March 2024. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do click a like and subscribe. If you would like to hear more from me, do check out the links below where you will find the link for my website and all my social media, Substack, and also Patreon. I will see you again soon, and in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.